Good afternoon and welcome to the Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust meeting of April 25th, 2023. I'll now call the meeting to order. Item 2 on the agenda are the minutes from the September Trust meeting. Do we have any comments or questions on the preceding minutes? Do what? It says September. It wouldn't be September. From February 28th, 2023. Thank you.
Oh, just what's posted online.
That's posted correctly. It was on the script incorrectly.
Oh,
All right. If not, we can take a motion.
okay. Give me a sec. Fix that now.
All right. We have a motion to second. Please vote. And the item passes. Brings us to item 3 on the agenda, the ratification of claims. Any comments or questions? If not, we can take a motion. And please vote. That item passes as well. That brings us to item 4 on the agenda, items for individual consideration. We've had a request to strike item 4A, but we would need to vote on that. So I would like to take a motion on the item. We have a motion to second. Item 4A is stricken. Gets us to item 4B, approving an allocation not to exceed $1.5 million in support of phase 1 of the Oak Grove Affordable Housing Project. Ms. McSpadden.
We have a presentation by Cassie Malone, and I'll introduce her here in just a moment. I wanted to give you just a high level. This is a TIF 4 request for $1.5 million. About $250,000 of that is a pre-development loan that would be repaid once they have their final long-term debt in place. So it's a cash request, so this is on an affordable housing project, so there's no tax increment to be earned, but we have about $6.5 million in the fund today, and we continue to earn. There's no debt on that TIF, so we have about 8 years left, I think, and so we'll continue to earn about $1 million a year is what we're getting there. So I'll introduce Cassie, and she's got a few slides to show you about the project.
Good afternoon. My name is Cassie. I'm here to talk to y'all about the Oak Grove redevelopment. So Oak Grove is located at Southwest 15th and South Grand Boulevard. It was built in 1968. It sits on approximately 42 acres and it has 288 units. It is one of our largest affordable family developments in the city. It has over 1,000 residents, and about 61% of those are children under the age of 18. 80% of the households at this development are considered extremely low income or have incomes below 30% of the area median income. The current property includes a management office, community center, Head Start daycare facility, and then various playgrounds throughout the property. Okay, I will figure this out eventually. Yeah. Okay, so the majority of the units in this of the 288 units consist of these. The top picture, the 2-story townhomes, those are 2 to 3 bedroom units, or the single-story duplex-style structures that range from 1 bedroom to 5 bedroom units. Oak Grove has not had a substantial renovation since it was developed over 52 years ago. So utilizing tax credits, we plan to substantially renovate the property. This will not only include upgrades to the units, but also infrastructure improvements along with community center improvements, new Head Start daycare facility, and a new education center. Nope. Yes, please. Okay, so a few of the details involved with the TIF ask. It will be used for infrastructure. There's 4 main items in that. The first is the road extension off of Southwest 15th. This is intended to tie directly into the existing Dell entrance. There's also going to be stormwater channel improvements for the stormwater channel that's in the center of the property. And then landscaping and beautification improvements along Southwest 15th Street, as well as some transfer of city-owned land along with a sale of some housing authority-owned land to create a commercial pad on that southeast or northeast corner of the property. Next. Okay, so the first one I'll highlight is that commercial pad. So this will involve the transfer of some city-owned land as well as the demolition of 18 existing units and the sale of that land to OnQ. They would place their new gas station at that corner. When we were speaking with OnQ about this potential development, some of the agreements that were worked into this transfer, sale of land and transfer is walkability, to ensure that there's walkability between the commercial site and the neighborhood. They will install bike racks along with additional pedestrian-friendly amenities at their gas station. They'll also host a job fair for the Oak Grove, specifically for the Oak Grove residents. They will have ample fresh food and produce options in addition to their other food options that they offer. And then they will also make an annual donation to our after-school feeding program at our community center that's located in the Oak Grove Community Center, as well as the landscaping improvements on Southwest 15th Street. Next. The next one is that stormwater channel and landscaping improvements. So this stormwater channel has a history of being very, very problematic during severe rainstorms and severe weather. So we will use those TIP dollars to improve this, which should improve the safety for our residents. Next is the street expansion off of Southwest 15th Street. So this really will create a new entrance for the redeveloped neighborhood. It will improve connectivity for the neighborhood and directly tie into the renovated community center, Head Start facility, and education center. So the summary of the project is it has 288 units currently. We would demolish and relocate 18 of those units, which would leave 270 units. The 18 demolished units would then be new units constructed on a vacant piece of land on the south portion of this property. That would leave us with 288 units final, 270 of those renovated, and 18 brand new. All of the units in this development are going to have project-based housing choice vouchers. So the program that we use to dispose of this from public housing into those project-based Section 8 vouchers will be a combination of RAD, which stands for Rental Assistance Demonstration, and then also a combination of Section 18. So the RAD and the PBV units are just HUD lingo for how we're doing this. So this is the proposed funding plan. The entire project is going to be a little bit over $66 million. So that TIF request is $1.5 million. It will be cash up front. We anticipate that $1.3 million will be used for the infrastructure piece. The rest will be the upfront pre-development loan, and then just under $250,000 will be repaid at closing. This is a holistic view of the entire project. It's going to be done in 2 phases. So that first phase includes the 288 units, the commercial pad. The green is the expanded community and neighborhood center. The kind of tan color is where the new construction will go. That includes 18 units as well as approximately 80 additional units. And then the blue is that core property. To the south, you'll see phase 2. It's going to have approximately 144 units, so that'll include 100 new constructed units on that tan color piece, and then we'll also disposition or transfer some existing scattered site or single-family public housing units and renovate them, and then they'll be managed by the same property management team that's going to be in that green section of that community center to the north. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead.
I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on the 18 units, as far as, like, you mentioned relocation, and so in the meantime, how will that look for those that are currently in those 18 units?
Right, so what we're going to do is if somebody vacates the units voluntarily, we just won't release them. So we won't have a new person in that unit while we're planning this process. For the residents that are living in those units, when we do close on financing and relocation begins, they'll be relocated to another unit on the property. So there won't be any off-site relocation.
Okay, and they'll be fully
Yes.
supported through that process?
Yes, we're
Okay.
required, that's a requirement of HUD. Anytime we do a redevelopment like this, we pay for the relocation expenses. We offer relocation counseling, and all of that is included, and there's specific requirements from HUD and the federal government that we have to follow.
And then for the new units, once those are available, will they have first availability or choice to get into those?
Correct. So for this specific property, it's a RAD redevelopment. So with RAD comes the right to return. It means that we cannot permanently involuntary relocate any resident from the property. So they will have the ability to stay on the property, and then for those newly constructed units, they'll have preference.
Okay, thank you. I'm excited to see this area get some renovation. They desperately need it.
Yes.
It has not, I personally see it every day and drive by, and I've been able to see the neighborhood in there, and I definitely know that they're gonna benefit from upgrades. The one thing I was wondering, as far as the commercial pad, it's a very busy area, so I was just wondering, how will the planning support the busy area? I know that little corner had a little curve, so will they take over that entire corner?
Yes.
Okay.
They'll take over that entire corner. We'll use specific safety-inspired design principles, SEPTED, to make sure it's cohesive with the neighborhood and that's pedestrian-friendly and that's not a nuisance with traffic.
Okay, wonderful. And then last thing, I was wondering, when you mentioned the connection to the Dell facility, is that just meaning a walkway to the Dell facility? I know it's just across, but I was just wondering what that looked like.
I think we anticipate trying to get a signal crossing, but at a minimum, it would be a crosswalk anticipated.
Okay, yeah, it's a really busy
Yes.
zone there, so I was just worried about that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
Relative to those units that are going to be renovated, what happens to the residents during that time period, and how long is the renovation period per unit?
Yeah, so that's where it gets fun. It's going to be what we call a rolling rehab. So all the residents will be relocated on site. So we'll let about 25 units-ish go vacant. We will set those up as what we call hotel units. So all the furniture will stay in the unit. We'll purchase furniture. It'll stay in the unit. They will temporarily relocate into those hotel units. And we anticipate those renovations taking probably 3 months. I don't quote me on that because we haven't finalized all of our design details yet, but it should take about 3 months, and then they will relocate into a renovated unit.
So just so I'm clear, phase one, the 288 units, that's on-site relocation, and that's by using the 25 units that you will leave available and not release. And so the total project to do all 288 units, and I think that may be what you were trying to get at, Rhonda, from start to completion, what are we talking about?
Time-wise, our
No,
goal
the
is,
entire 288 units,
Are you talking about timeline?
phase-wise, yes.
yeah, phase one. Our goal is to get it done in 12 months.
The entire 288
Yep.
units?
We're going to move
Wow.
quick.
I had one more, now that you mentioned that. I know you said you were still in the design phase stage, but are there any images or potential what it would look like?
We have preliminary, but nothing is set in stone.
Okay, so that's still in development.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions for Cassie? I did have one question myself. What is your turnover rate on these units? Do you know?
This property actually is, people, they move in and they stay, so the turnover rate on this property is not very high. I don't have the exact percentage, but I can get it for you.
Okay, great. I was just curious. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
It's a project that's well needed, for
Yeah,
sure.
we're excited to get started.
Excellent, thank you. All right, item 4B. If we don't have any other questions or comments, I can take a motion. We have a motion, a second. Please cast your votes. And the item passes. Brings us to item 4C, allocation not to exceed $21.5 million from increment district number G in support of the Boulevard Place project. Mr. Sudol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll make a couple of comments, and then do we have the presentation from the developer? This project you're familiar with, it had a previous allocation from 2021, and I want to just preface this by saying, you know, this is a really important corner. This project's gotten very difficult with the current environment. For it to happen, it's going to require additional help, but I think it's something worth doing from the standpoint of this being an 8-story project and one of our first steel vertical residential structures. I think it could be transformational for our city. And really, if you think about our Core to Shore TIF district and some of the planning processes around that, we really were looking for 7 to 15-story, more dense residential development around the park. This is a really key, not right on the park, but really key corner right next to the Omni. If you'll go to the first slide, I wanted to start by just talking about the change in the ask here. So probably should preface this. I know Stephen and Tim will talk about this in a moment, that really the numbers started out much lower even than this, but I wanted to kind of give a comparison from the previous deal in December of 21 to the deal that's being proposed today. As a reminder, there was a $1.5 million upfront allocation from TIF 2. That remains the same. That was really intended to be for the remediation costs. The original estimates were about $3 million, and the agreement had been the city would split that, 50-50 with the developer. So really the big ask is on the actual Core to Shore TIF allocation. One change which you do not see here, and the reason it says increment district G, this does not go through this body, but it goes through the council, is there's a proposal to do a carve out on that little site. And as a reminder, it's about 1.3 acres, so it's a really small site, so that it can have some additional years of TIF. That's contingent, this ask and both things are contingent upon each other. The intent would be if the allocation is not approved by this body and council, we would not move forward with that TIF change. So that being said, the ask is going from 5.7 million to the 21.5 million. It would be a pay-as-you-go TIF, only, there'd be no risk to the city of any upfront money or anything like that. The way that would be structured would be 95% of what's generated for the first 15 years, 70% of what's generated for the last 10 years, and really part of that's their intent is to try to do a private financing bond to monetize that, which you see in the capital stack there being the 6.7 million. And I think we had some questions about, the difference there. Well, the rate, the coverage ratio, the requirements to set aside reserves and interest, that monetizes only about at that level. And then any bit left over, would flow back into the project. Two big changes. The cost of this project's gone from from 71 million to 83 million, and they'll give you even a little more history that really it's been a bigger increase than that, but that I wanted to give you deal to deal. The other big one's the interest rate, the financing, and they can talk about that a little bit also. They were looking in that 3.5% to 4.5% range. Today, we believe we'll end up about 6 to 7%, at least 200 basis points, maybe more, on a $50 million loan. That's going to be an extra $1 million a year of interest on top of the increased cost. Previously, we had estimated their cash-on-cash return would be about $7 million, or 7%, and today we're estimating at these rates and this level, the cash-on-cash return would be down to 4%, even with this significantly higher TIF ask. Again, this would only be all funded within the taxes generated by this project, so if this project doesn't happen, those TIF dollars are not there. Tim Strange and Stephen Watts are here to give a quick presentation, just a reminder on this, and answer any other questions. Tim, take it away.
You bet. Thank you, Mr. Manager, Chairman, and trustees. We've been working diligently on this project for 5 years. It's hard to believe, but it'll be 5 years in June. The world has changed a lot, even since December of 21. We didn't anticipate, nor did anybody anticipate, construction pricing due to inflation, labor shortages, supply chain, now interest rates. So it's kind of the quadruple whammy, but we're still excited about the project. We want to go forward with the project. We think it's transformational for Oklahoma City, and we want to make it happen. Even though we're cutting our developer fee and lowering our returns, we're still able to do 36 workforce housing units at 80 to 120% of AMI. Also remind you that we're the same firm that's doing Alley's End at 4th and Gaylord. That's 211 units, 100% affordable at 60% of AMI. So we're committed to affordable housing. This project, Joe, with the cost, we can still do the workforce, but we can't do any affordable at the project. So with that background, I'm going to bring up Stephen Watts, my partner, who's going to talk a little bit more about the numbers and the history behind how we got to where we are today.
Thank you, and I think it might be good to kind of run through an overview on the project, just to kind of talk about some of the details. The project itself is an 8-story project, 260,000 square feet. It does connect to the parking garage that is directly to the south that serves the convention center, and it will also serve the parking for our project. As you can see from the slide, there's 5,000 square feet of retail on the ground floor. We do have a lease signed with Tupelo Honey. They're a national restaurant focused on brunch concept. And our units are, as Tim said, 265 total, a mix of studios, 1 beds, 2 beds, and a few 3 beds. There are workforce housing units set aside for the studios, the 1 beds, and the 2 beds. Equates to 36 total units. And the renderings here show some finishes on the interiors of the units and the exterior as well. That will have an 8th-floor amenity level where we'll have workout facility, outdoor deck, business center, and then on the ground floor we will have a swimming pool for the project. So in terms of the numbers, going over where we were, and as Kenny mentioned, in December of 21, we were at about 71 million, which actually was a significant increase from where we were when the project was first proposed in June 2018. We were at $53 million in overall costs. The biggest portion, project costs is of course construction numbers. At that time, our budget was for construction, just hard cost was about 40 million. We saw that go up to as high as last spring in March of 22 to 75 million. So as we worked those numbers down, at that time, overall project costs were about 100 million. We did some VE, mostly with the underground structure and the exterior of the building. We didn't cut any units or really cut any amenities, but we were able to get the costs down, just the hard costs, down to about 63 million. And that makes the overall project cost now about 83 million. So a lot of hard work. Obviously, the rental rates have changed to some degree not to some degree, they have changed. The rental market just overall has changed significantly since 2018, 5 years ago. So as AMI has increased and, the market rate for apartments has increased, our subsidized workforce housing apartments, those rates have gone up from what we originally presented. But they are still within the 80 to 120% AMI. So with that said, open to any questions that you might have or further discussion.
I do have one. As you mentioned, the parking garage, is that, do they share the parking garage that's there currently?
Yes, that's correct. So that parking garage is about 1,100 parking spaces, and we will have up to 320 parking spaces in the garage.
Okay. I was just curious about that part when you mentioned that.
Yeah.
And then, so as of now, as far as, funding and whatnot, so if you get enough funding and to support the project, do you feel comfortable that moving forward and it fully developing?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. This TIF will be key to getting us over the finish line with our funding. So we're already working with First United Bank on the banking front, and that is one other change that is worth mentioning. Until we spring of 22, we were going to be using HUD financing, 221D4 market rate loan. But because of the interest rate environment and some of the VE we had to undertake, which included moving away from Davis-Bacon wages, which was a requirement for a HUD 221D4 loan, we did have to move to a more conventional bank financing. So that costs more obviously than the HUD 21D4 program.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning.
Yeah.
You were talking about the changes in the market on the development side and specifically the rental market. I'm assuming because of the growth of the population and some of the things that you just said, that your rental rates would have changed as well. Can you discuss that? What's the price per unit at this point? What are we looking at?
Yeah, so our workforce housing rental rates are going to be between, just under $1,000 to, a two-bed being, upwards of $1,500.
Okay.
Now, on the market rate side,
Yeah.
our apartments are going to be in the $2.50 a square foot range.
Okay.
So that will be kind of trending towards some of the newer housing developments that have opened, some of them even in the $3 a square foot range. The First National project is one that, in order to support the project, that's where the market rates are. But we do have the workforce housing 36 units set aside, which will be much lower than that.
Okay. Okay. And then I'm just curious to know, what are your alternatives if this TIF request doesn't go through?
We hope the TIF request goes through, but if it does not, we would probably have to look at changing the project. Not doing steel frame, talking with the Alliance on what that might look like. It might be less units. I don't think it's really what anybody wants to discuss, but that would be the only alternative I could think of.
Okay.
Yeah, Moran, in the end, it'll be a drastically different project than what we propose right now. We'll probably have to reduce the height of the project, number of stories, number of units, construction, everything will change about the project. So it'll be nothing like what it is today.
Okay. Are you thinking, I know that there's been a lot of market volatility recently, but there's hopeful forecasts for the future. And so I guess one of my questions is can we afford for this project to delay to see if some of the cost kind of trickle down or?
So I've spoken about this a little bit before with folks that, always you can get something else to develop somewhere. The question's how much and when. I think it's a real challenge. And for me, my recommendation why we would move forward on this is because we have someone willing to take significant risk to get a taller steel frame structure, which we haven't had one of those built in the city in decades. I don't know. I can't think of the last time one was built. You also have to remember how small of a piece of property this is. If you look at it on a map, it's a really small footprint to get 265 units there, and that's really what we're trying to set we're trying to set the tone around Scissortail, and that's the sort of product that we want.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I'm just worried if we you know, if we pull the plug on this, we go back to the drawing board, you know, we have to RFP it again, we have to see if folks are interested. We're probably years down the road and we lose a lot of opportunities. And I think we end up with something smaller. But all of us could be wrong on that, but
Yeah.
that's, you know, my opinion today.
Yeah. I guess my concern on, not even concern, but my thought is, you know, when you talk about setting the tone, we're talking about 21.5 million out of 83 million. That ratio is pretty high. And so when we're talking about making good use of funds, I believe in the project, I'm just worried if we're going to set this precedence of investing, is that 38% of the
Yeah,
project? That's pretty high.
Let me address that too. I think I've talked at council on this about, you know, the city, we've done things that are transformational in the office market. We've done things that are transformational in the tourism market. And the city's leaned in really hard, sometimes as much as 100% of the TIF. This is a case where I think it could be transformational in the downtown residential market, and that's why I would be recommending something like this. If this was a Texas wrap, you know, 3-4 story, I would not recommend going that heavy on a percentage basis. I also think there's also a little bit of a different component on this one in that it's something that started years ago. You know, there's been a lot of things through COVID, problems with the site, the remediation. It's a very dirty site. There's benzene. We had to dig wells and inject chemicals that have really delayed this, that I think are a little bit unique to this project, that maybe, you know, something to hang your hat on in terms of why we would, you know, continue this partnership and try to move this project forward. But I do think it is something, this is a significant difference. It's a significant policy question. For me, it's, I think, trying to continue the momentum and move a project like this forward. But I do agree that only on things that are very transformational should we go this heavy on.
And I guess I'm still curious if this is the only way to move forward.
Let me interject real quick if you don't mind. You know, and it is a pay-as-you-go TIF. So the 21.5 million, our plan as of right now would be to monetize that on the first 15 years, and that generates about 6.7 million to monetize that. So, and then the back, you know, 10 years at the 70%. You know, obviously that's 15 years down the line. So for us up front, it doesn't move the needle 21.5 million.
No, I get that.
You know, there is a time value of money, you know, discount to that amount. And it is, we're only taking the TIF on the project, you know, ad valorem that we generate. But then also just on another aspect on this site, you know, talking about the contamination, we were delayed about 2.5 years right out of the gate because of the contamination underground. Then we worked with the Alliance, we worked with the City of Oklahoma City on a Brownsfields application to get a remediation plan for this site. Any other development would happen on the site would have significant costs of this remediation to be able to build housing there. Also, it's a very small site, so that's why we have to go as tall as we do. And it was specifically designed to connect to the parking garage. If you see the parking garage from Oklahoma City Boulevard, you'll see 6 openings for where this building could connect to the parking garage. So we sort of had to battle to get the amount of space that we did on that site, because originally after we were awarded, the parking garage wanted 200 feet north to south, and we had to work to get back to 143 feet for our site, which the previous would have left us with only 100 feet, which probably would have been a 13 or 14-story building. Also, that parking garage is about 6 stories tall, so if you did do something of a lesser scale, you know, you'd probably end up with a 3 or 4-story building you know, sitting right in front of a 6-story parking garage. So just a couple additional points of commentary.
I also wanted to mention, I feel like it's, as you mentioned, there was already some delays, and we're already kind of going into year 5. So I was curious just to see if this would be sufficient to kind of get it moving along. I know there were some things you're coming up, you know, underground, and there's a lot of different things you're experiencing. So would this be enough for the project to continue and to see some momentum and to be able to get you, you know, where you need to go? Because I do see, at this point, it's either one of those, we want to see it move forward and allow it to flourish. And additionally, would this be something that there would be another opportunity to ask for more, or would this be kind of their cap?
This is it.
So, okay.
And yes, absolutely, this will allow us to be able to move forward. We've been waiting to go through this process kind of as a precursor to the rest of our financing, so.
I mean, I took a long look at this weekend, and this is such a critical corner there at Omni and the park. And if we are going to do this vertical and density development, which is what we all want, I think, in this area, and you hearken back to 30 years ago when, with the environmental issues in this area, nobody wanted to build. And we've worked on this for 5 years. We've had some setbacks, but this is a critical step for us in what we're trying to do around Scissortail Park, in my mind.
And I did want to mention also, as far as, I believe from our standpoint, as from a trust, we've looked at all the risks, and if there are fluctuations in interest and whatnot, I think we're on the safe zone. From my understanding, that we're covered and we're in a good position. Is that correct?
Yes, this would be structured purely, other than the TIF2 money, which is in upfront cash the trust has, the rest would only be just pay as you go. As it comes in, it gets returned. There's no debt. Any debt that they would do would be on them, private, conduit debt or private debt. No debt on the trust, no debt on the city. So from a risk standpoint, this is all within, really, even if you throw in the TIF2, this is all within the increment generated by the project. So if the project doesn't happen, those dollars aren't generated.
Right.
We will build safeguards into the economic development agreement.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right, if not, we can take a motion on item 4C. We have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. The item passes 4-1. Moves us to item 4D, to receive the amended and restated Downtown Maps Economic Development Project Plan. Mr. Sudol?
Yes, in your packet, and I don't know, do we have a map on this, Joanna? Or we wanted to pass along that we had proposed some changes which had worked their way through. While she's pulling this up, it's easier to show on the map. We'd made some changes to the downtown TIF plan, mainly to remove some properties that later on you'll see with proposals moving through to add some of those to the innovation district, and to do a couple of carve-outs on some properties. This was really, so there's two project plans. What we're bringing you today is just the downtown. You'll see the innovation at a later date. But this is really a strategic move to try to, TIF 2 is expiring in 2026. I just want to be very clear what the city council approved. We are not reactivating TIF 2. All the dollars today that will go to the other taxing jurisdictions in 2026 will still go there. What we did was carve out a couple of specific properties that are pretty significant areas that have potential development, areas that are vacant, not producing anything or producing very little. It also, there's no damage to TIF 2 in terms of they represent about 2% of the increment related to TIF 2. So a couple things just to drill down. All the stuff that is just right on the eastern border of this, next to I-235, there are quite a few properties in there that are owned by Okura, or they are vacant or significantly underdeveloped. Those are being carved out. So as far as this plan goes, they are just removed from the downtown TIF. You will see an amendment proposed on the innovation TIF that actually went to council for introduction this morning to add those same properties. They're the ones in kind of an aqua blue. Those will be proposed to be added to the innovation district TIF project plan. There's a couple of other properties. the ballpark property and the property to the east of the ballpark that's a parking lot, and then the property around the U-Haul that's known as the compress lot. Those are two undeveloped sets of properties. And I will say, we're not doing anything with the ballpark. The reason that's drawn is on the northeast corner of the ballpark, there is some vacant land, which is currently a surface parking. And part of the deal is if the city owns the parking lot to the east of it, if we ever develop that, we've got to do something with parking with the baseball team. So having that pulled in just potentially gives us a tool to do something like that. Don't have anyone that's talking to develop that now, but that's what we're looking at. There is some significant development being contemplated right now around the U-Haul building, and that's something that at such time that's ready to be brought forward, we'll bring it forward. But that's, again, would provide some, longer run incentives potential on these properties. And then there's two tiny little yellow pieces that are the properties on the eastern side of the block from where the First National is. There's some carve-outs there on some properties where we're looking to try to do some conversions of some office into some housing. And that's something that the city was interested in bringing forward. So those are, and there's some zoom ins of those properties. Sorry, I should have made that a little easier for your eyes to see. So that's what has been approved by council. This is just bringing this forward for you to receive and to see that those changes have been made. Again, there's another project plan amendment on the innovation side to add those aqua-colored properties to that that's making its way through the process. And at such time, if that gets fully approved by council, we'll bring that forward to the trust as well to receive. So with that, be happy to answer any questions.
The Innovation District's TIF is unique in that it's education and workforce.
It's still local assistance in development financing, but it is unique that it does have a category
Allowable uses
for public entities.
Okay.
And you'll see when we are bringing that forward, we have proposed adding additional budget to that category as well. It's to be able to use for STEM training for teachers and students, primarily on the northeast side. We have a TIF education committee that makes recommendations. We just started allocating dollars to that last year, about $350,000 last year. So the hope is that creates a lot more development in the Innovation District, helps with the connectivity between innovation and downtown, but also a side benefit would be trying to get some more dollars into that education category.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments? If not, we can take a motion to receive item 4D. We have a motion and a second, please vote. The item's passed. Brings us to item 4E, the Oklahoma City Economic Development Foundation Film and Creative Industries presentation. Ms. Simpson.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jill Simpson. I think I've met most of you, but there's a few new people that I haven't, so nice to meet you. I want to start by saying I think we're on a really good track to meet all of our benchmarks for the first year. The report you have for quarter 2 is our first quarterly report, and I'm not going to recommunicate all the information in that report. I'd rather talk to you about some of the bigger picture things that we're working on and have discovered that needed attention as we're moving forward. In getting my feet on the ground in the new office, I realized that we have 3 other new film commissioners in the state. Tay Vasovsky has transitioned over to Cherokee Nation. Jeanette Stanton, who I hired years ago in the state office, is now the state film commissioner. And we have a brand new film commissioner in Tulsa who was recruited from Dallas, Meg Gould. So I've been working with them and trying to bring some leadership into the arena of creating some unification, because I see that that's going to be a really necessary component for our succeeding. One of the things that I've spent a lot of time on in the first quarter is convening. I've called a meeting of the business owners in Oklahoma City for one meeting to talk about film legislation and to try to bring all the different groups with different ideas of what we needed to achieve to the same table to try to talk and forge some kind of unity moving forward for how we approach legislation at the Capitol. I also convened a group of local crew and really took them through everything that we're trying to do at the Capitol this session to bring some transparency to it, because often the messaging is not hitting the mark of where it needs to go, so that everybody feels invested in what the big picture asks are that are happening. You may be aware that we do have the guidelines in place for the new Oklahoma City incentive, and we have successfully landed a huge project that is on the ground in Oklahoma City, Twisters, which is a universal project with a budget of about $100 million. And based on having the Oklahoma City incentive, we've been able to land that production here in Oklahoma City. Boots on the ground right now. They start filming next week, and you may be wondering why we haven't announced. My hands have been tied. I'm working on getting a non-disclosure agreement signed today. The state got theirs signed yesterday. This project has been a bit backwards in how we do these things because they've been waiting to make sure that certain bills passed at the Capitol. One of them is on the brink of being signed, and it really would help us qualify non-resident crew at a time when we don't have enough crew for them to hire. They've been trying, they haven't been able to get all that they needed, so to make their numbers work, we had to be able to qualify a certain amount of non-resident. But they start filming next week. They'll be on Park Avenue. They'll be filming at Gilded Acorn. They will be redressing Stella Nova to look like a New York City bodega. So it's going to be an exciting few days in Oklahoma City. And then they'll be filming at some various areas in small communities around Oklahoma City. The good news is I will be delivering goodie bags to them on Friday with all kinds of coupons and trying to drive them to spend as much money in Oklahoma City as we can possibly get them to do. By the same token, we have two small projects in the queue for the rebate. One is roughly $575,000, so they basically made it over the mark. But as you know, we want to support those local filmmakers and diverse voices as well. And this project called Defiant Vanities is from a diverse group of filmmakers, which I'm really excited about. I'm trying to keep this brief. I've got so much to cover. I'm really working to try to bring workforce development elements together. When we have so many different groups doing similar things, I'm trying to inventory what those are, bring those entities to the table, come up with some kind of unified workforce curriculum, training, and possibly testing, so that the people we're putting out in the industry all have the highest quality training out there. Let's see, I've been very involved with trying to come up with the legislation this year, something I hadn't planned on. But when you have 4 new film commissioners, and I'm somebody who's been around a long time, I worked with Prairie Surf, I worked with the Alliance, I worked with Green Pastures, trying to come up with some kind of legislation that would hit all the marks to support all of their agendas and the missions of their companies. So there's a lot going on. It's all good stuff, but it's a lot of activity at one time. I look forward to the summer, having some time to really kind of regroup and look forward. If our bills don't pass this session for raising our cap to 80 million, then we're going to have a lot of preparation to do before next session. With that, I open it up to questions. Anyone? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, we can take a motion on receiving item 4E. We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Item is passed. Brings us to item 4F, the Alliance for Economic Development of Oklahoma City Fiscal Year 2023 Second Quarter Report. Mr. Sudol.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So I'll try to be brief. There's a report in your packet, has a lot of information. So if there's anything you'd like to know more about, but I thought I'd just highlight a few quick things. One of the major programs the Alliance is handling, as a reminder, the ARPA Business Assistance Programs, which had a lot of help from the Chamber and from Ms. McSpadden with the city staff. And as a reminder, there was $20 million allocated from the council that the Alliance is handling. About $16 million of that went to small business and nonprofit assistance, about $4 million to workforce development initiatives. Within that $16 million, we had we had a minimum of $4 million that had to be spent on minority businesses. I'm happy to report that that's gone very well. The first sets of programs were the technical assistance, the facade improvements, and the pandemic mitigation, which are really a way of saying small capital improvements like plexiglass, drive-through windows, things like that. We've had over 400 applications approved on that. Most all the funds allocated to that particular program have been allocated. We've had actually, and I'm going to give a little update. This is through Q2. Through today, we've had closer to $4 million actually spent. This says $1 million has been spent so far. But just want to point out, it's done some great things. 75% of those applicants have been minority businesses. 50% have been in qualified census tracts, which are low income, where more than 51% of the folks are classified as low income. So we've really been able to target those businesses that have really needed it. We're also doing some other things with workforce, and we focused on 2 areas. Digital skills to kind of help folks who are already in the job market get better jobs. And then we've also focused on kind of the hospitality and retail, and really with a focus on trying to provide entry-level employment and second chance employment. So at my next, the third quarter report, I'll have a little bit more detail on that. We've got some exciting things working there, but we've got about 4 of those up and running, 2 on the digital side, 2 on the kind of hospitality and retail side, and there's several others coming. Another one I just wanted to highlight, again, thank you to the Chamber. We've been working kind of a 2-pronged process for a minority business supplier program. We're working with the Urban League, Hispanic Chamber, and REI on the side of the small businesses, helping organize those small businesses, put together, information, helping them get registered to bid on contracts, figure out like what kind of certifications and things they need, really getting them moving forward. How can they bid on these contracts with businesses and governments? And then on the other side, the Chamber's helping to coordinate, the other side of that. Hey, large businesses that have a lot of spend, how can you, integrate with our small business groups? How can you make commitments and things like that? So it's kind of a matchmaking between the two. So it's an exciting one that we're getting close to getting that launched. Another area I just wanted to reiterate around our work with Tinker and really through one of our entities, the Oklahoma Industries Authority. We're continuing to work through, assisting Tinker as the city's largest employer to continue to be able to expand eastward. There's a lot of work the city did along with Alliance and Chamber staff on securing ARPA funding to move the water line. The $35 million has been acquired, and they're in the process of working through that to get that water line relocated to Post Road. In addition, the Alliance through OIA is continuing to work with a lot of the land transactions east of Douglas. There's several pieces of land that we're working through, where the eventual Bomber campus will go. And there's another piece of that just recently was announced. So it's kind of cryptic in the report here. It says 240 and Air Depot, talking about some acquisition of land. That was the Pratt Whitney deal that was just announced. So we're happy to say, we've gotten that deal done and to facilitate. It's over at 800, and I think it's like 845,000 square feet. Sustainment center, training, office, warehouse space, and that's really where they work on our aircraft engines for our Air Force and others. So exciting project. On the northeast side, still have a lot of things going on, a lot of different properties through the Urban Renewal Authority that we're developing single-family. We're doing lots of things. The one thing I probably mentioned there is one of the MAPS 4 projects was to provide funds to acquire the property at 23rd and MLK, and we were able to complete that. So Ocura now owns about 11 acres at 23rd and MLK, and it's pretty much everything that fronts, from the corner, everything that fronts MLK, and everything that goes up or down 23rd that was owned previously by the Binkowskis. And so that's something we're working towards doing, the remediation studies and environmental reports, and we're doing some other studies there trying to determine, what are our next steps for developing that property. And then Innovation District, we talked a little bit of a preview today about some of the TIF changes that we're looking at there, but also just continuing to look at development opportunities over there. And the biggest one that's happening, again, is Convergence, so that's moving along. And if you've driven past there and seen the work that's going on, we're continuing to work with them trying to get that finalized, and part of that includes Innovation Hall. So we're through the Redevelopment Authority, which is another entity that Alliance works with. We are working on that, about to get the plans and things finalized for that. So those are some of the highlights. There's quite a bit more in here. If there's anything that folks would like to have other questions on, I'll be happy to answer, but there's about a 6-page report in your packet.
Thank you, Mr. Siddle. If we have no other questions or comments, we can take a motion. We have a motion and a second. Please vote. The item passes. Brings us to item 5 on the agenda, the General Manager's report, but I know Ms. McSpadden had a comment she wanted to make before that report.
I do. I have a correction that I want to make to the report for you. Our Tax Increment Finance Districts 9 and 15 report has an error in it. The expenses reported in your version of the report as 14.9 million. That is not correct. It is half that. Just to give you some detail, we are working to segregate the expenses for 9 and 15 so that we could later perhaps report those separately. And in the database, it caused a glitch, and we've corrected it. I've confirmed manually that that correction took place. So next month's report will be accurate and not doubled.
Thank you. Mr. Siddle?
I don't have any further comment. That's our normal report that has the financial information, SIP information. So as always, if there are things to call out abnormally, we call them out. Otherwise, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Brings us to item 6. Any comments from staff? Any comments from trustees? Any citizens signed up to speak? If not, that brings us to item 7. We are adjourned.